Hello and welcome back to another full step-by-step PC build guide, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build a PC in the latest case from Fractal Design. This is the Meshify 3 and I've got the top of the line model. This is the Ambience Pro RGB. If you see any parts in the video you like, you'll find links to all the parts I've used in the video description. So let's make a start by taking a detailed look at the case. To remove our case's tempered glass panel, there's a little notch at the back you can pull the panel out from, and then it just needs to be lifted up and away. And our other side panel is removed in exactly the same way. Taking a look at our case's top I/O, we've got a power button, we've got two USB Type A ports, a single Type C port, and this will support speeds of up to 20 gigabits per second, and we've got a combined headphone and microphone jack. To remove our case's top panel, there's a little tab on the back that you can pull, and then you're going to be able to lift the panel up and away. We've got a removable fan stroke radiator bracket on the top of the case, and on this bracket you're going to be able to mount up to two 120 or two 140mm fans, or up to a 240 or 280mm radiator. To remove the bracket, there's two capital thumb screws at the top we're going to need to loosen, and then we're going to be able to tilt the bracket up, pull it towards us and lift away. Our case's front panel can simply be pulled off from the bottom, and if you take a look at the back of this panel, you'll notice there's no additional dust filters, and Fractal are going with just mesh at the front. Taking a look at the top of the panel, you'll notice we've got some gold pins, and they're going to make contact with these gold contacts at the top of the case. And that's how you're going to be able to control the RGB on the front panel. So with our front panel removed, you can see that we've got three of Fractal's brand new Momentum 14 RGB fans pre-installed at the front. And you can see these have a really nice RGB lighting ring on them. If you prefer at the front, it is possible to mount up to three 120mm fans or up to a 360mm radiator. So if you do want to change up the fans at the front, they are installed in a removable bracket. We've got two screws at the top you're going to need to loosen. And then with the screws removed, you are going to be able to tilt the bracket out. I'm not able to get it out fully because our fan cables are still pre-managed and going through to the back. And once you've tilted it out fully, you are able to free it up at the bottom, and then you're going to be able to remove the whole bracket. If you do want to install 120mm fans at the front, you're going to simply unscrew these fans at the back. You're going to then take this bracket and flip it round 180 degrees on its long axis. And that's then going to bring the brackets closer to the middle on each side, and 120mm fans are going to fit at the front. You can see at the front we've got this nice deep air guide, which is going to be directing the air coming in from the front up and into your graphics card. The only slight issue with this air guide is it does slightly limit your radiator compatibility at the front. The maximum length of radiator at the front with the air guide in place is up to 420mm. Although if you want to install a larger radiator up to 445mm, you are going to need to remove this air guide. So to remove the air guide, there's one screw at the bottom we're going to need to remove. And then with the screw removed, you just need to pull the air guide towards the side, and then you're going to be able to tilt it up and remove it from the case. So the downside of this is aesthetically, this is not going to look as good. So really the only reason for doing this is if you need that large radiator support at the front. At the rear of the case is up to a single 120mm fan or radiator. So in terms of motherboard support, the case is compatible with motherboards up to E80X in size, and if you want to go with a CPR color, the maximum height supported is up to 174mm. If you are wanting to go with an E80X motherboard, you are going to have to slide this cable cover bracket towards the front of the case. To do this, we're going to have to loosen the thumb screw at the top, and we're going to actually have to remove the bottom thumb screw. And you can see now we're able to slide the cable cover bracket towards the front. So this is going to give us plenty of room for an E80X motherboard. To remove the bracket altogether, we're going to need to remove the top thumb screw. You notice we've got a little bit of metal holding the bracket in place. We're going to have to lift it up to remove it, but the only place we can do that is right in the middle of the bracket. So what we're going to want to do is slide our cable cover bracket along till that bit of metal is in the middle. And then we're going to be able to lift the bracket up to remove it. Taking a look at the rear of the case, you can see we've got 7 horizontal PC expansion slot brackets. To get access to the slots, you're going to have to remove this little cover. Just a matter of pushing up from the bottom, and then you're going to be able to slide it out. So in terms of graphics card support, the maximum length supported is up to 349mm. Take a look down at the bottom, we've got this nice ARGB lighting bar. And it's great to see that our bottom dust filter is easy to remove and it can be pulled out from the side. Moving into the rear of the case, you can see we've got cable cutouts in sensible places, and cable routing space looks to be good at 34.5mm. We've got Velcro cable straps pre-installed for managing cables at the back of the case, while at the front we've got these 3 cable organizing clips. To adjust them, you can simply push the button in at the top and at the bottom, and that's then going to let you slide the clips out if you have bigger cables. Or these can be removed altogether, just again squeeze at the top and at the bottom, and you're going to be able to remove the whole clip. So because I've got the Ambience Pro RGB version of the case, it comes with Fractal's brand new Adjust Pro hub. So this is a new ecosystem for Fractal. The big advantages of it are you're going to be able to adjust your fan speeds and the RGB of any devices that you plug into it without needing to run RGB control software on your system. How you're going to do it is using a web browser, and I'll show you this at the end. So if we just go ahead and remove the Velcro strap, you'll see that our hub is still staying in place, and that's because it does magnetically attach to the case. So everything in this hub is already connected up. The only thing you're going to need to do is plug in a SATA cable for your power supply to power the hub. If we take a look over to the right hand side of the hub, you'll notice that our case fans and also our case RGB lighting is already plugged into the hub. So the hub has 4 channels, 2 of them are taken up, but we've got 2 additional channels to plug further devices into. And if we unplug one of these, you'll see that they're simply USB Type-C connectors. So if you want to add in more of Fractal's Momentum RGB fans, simply you're just going to plug them into the hub. So you get 2 cables in the case accessory box. The first is a cable extension. So one end is going to plug into the port on the hub, and then the other end we've got our Type-C connector, and this would simply be if you need a longer cable run for your RGB device. The other cable, if it comes, is for adding in standard PWM and ARGB connectors. So we've got a Type-C connector that plugs into a port on the hub. And then coming from that, we've got a standard 4-pin PWM connector. And if we remove the plastic cover, we've got a 3-pin 5-volt ARGB connector. So you can plug a standard device into this and control it using the hub software. So you're going to connect this up to your PC. So at the top, we've got both a 4-pin PWM and a USB cable. So all you're going to simply need to do is plug the other ends of these cables into a USB 2.0 and system fan header on your motherboard. In terms of drive mounting, behind our motherboard we've got 4 brackets. In their current position they're set up to mount 2 3.5-inch drives, but it is possible to have them mounting 4 2.5-inch drives, or you could have 2 2.5-inch drives on one side and a single 3.5-inch drive on the other side. So each of these brackets are secured at the top with a single screw, and you'll notice we have an additional hole here and an additional hole here. So if you want to go with a 2.5-inch drive, you're simply going to move the bracket from here to here and from here to here. However, when it comes to installing your drives, you're actually going to need to remove these brackets, fix them to your drive outside the case, and then reinsert them. So the first step in installing a 3.5-inch drive is to install these anti-vibration pads into the bracket. We can then line our 3.5-inch drive up with the bracket, and we'll secure it into place using the large hard drive screws. For our 2.5-inch drives, it's these holes that we're going to use. We're going to be able to stack one drive on top of the other and secure 2 to each set of brackets. So we can set a drive into place, and we'll screw it on using the smaller screws with a little lip around the outside. And if we're wanting to install another drive, we can simply set another drive on top, and then we just need to go round to the other side and add the other bracket into place. So then we just need to install the drives into the case. So there's little notches at the bottom we just need to line the brackets up with, and then we can secure them at the top with a screw. And then we can add our 2 2.5-inch drives into place. So using these brackets, you can either have 2 3.5-inch drives, 4 2.5-inch drives, or 2 2.5-inch drives and a single 3.5-inch drive. If that's not enough drive mounting for you, we do have mounting holes for mounting a further 2 2.5-inch drives at the bottom of the case, and then secure the drives in from underneath using the screws with a little lip around the outside. Your power supply is going to go down at the bottom, and the case is compatible with full-sized ATX power supplies up to a maximum length of 180mm. And it's good to see we've got a removable power supply bracket at the back. It's held on with 2 captive thumb screws. So you're simply going to fix this bracket to the back of your power supply and then slot the whole thing in from the back. We're now ready to start working our motherboard, and we're going to be installing our CPU, the bracket for our CPU cooler, our M.2 SSD and our RAM before we put the motherboard into the case. To open our socket cover, we need to push this lever down and out, bring it to the middle of the motherboard, and then we're going to be able to open the socket cover up. We can then take our CPU, holding it by the edges and making sure we've got the text the correct way up, and carefully lower it down into the socket. We'll just give it a little wiggle from side to side and up and down to check it's sitting correctly in the socket. And once we're happy that it is, we can go ahead and close the cover down again. Then as we close this lever, the black bit of plastic will pop off, and we'll put it in our motherboard box for safekeeping. To install the bracket for our CPU cooler, the first thing we need to do is remove the stock clips. They're each held on with 2 screws. We can then set our brackets into place, and you'll notice that in each of these brackets there is a little arrow pointing towards the CPU, so make sure you put them on the correct way round. And then we'll secure them into place using the 4 original screws. To remove the heatsink for our M.2 SSD, we just need to push this little lever up, and then we're going to be able to tilt the heatsink up and lift it away. So our motherboard has three M.2 SSD slots. The top one is the Gen 5 slot, the bottom two are Gen 4 slots. The PCI lanes for the top two slots come from the CPU, where the PCI lanes for the bottom slot come from the chipset. So although I'm only installing a Gen 4 drive, we do have this nice heat pad behind the top slot. So I'm going to install it in the top slot. So we just need to remove the plastic protection from the heat pad. We can insert our M.2 SSD into the slot, and then we push the drive down. We might just need to push this little lever a little bit to get it to go in, and then that clip is going to hold the drive in place. We're going to need to remove the plastic protection from the heatsink, and we can then replace our heatsink. We're going to be installing our RAM in the second and fourth slot along from the CPU, so we can open the clips on these slots. Then all we need to do is line the RAM up with the slot. And once we're happy everything's lined up, it's just some firm pressure to the RAM, and it's going to clip into place. Next, we can set the motherboard into the case, line it up with the standoffs at the back. There's no screw hole in this middle standoff, so we're going to use 8 of the flat-headed screws to secure the motherboard to the case. Next, we've got our case cables to get plugged in. Our HD audio cable is going to go into this header down the bottom left-hand side of the motherboard. So we'll bring it through the cutout, and we'll plug it in with the HD audio text facing the bottom. We've got a system fan header down here, so we'll plug the PWM cable coming from our hub through and get it plugged in. Our front panel header is this one down the bottom right hand side of the motherboard, and we've only got one cable to plug in. It's our power switch, and it's going to go into the top row into pins 3 and 4 from the left hand side. We've got two USB 2.0 headers down the bottom of the motherboard, so we'll bring the USB cable coming from our hub through and get it plugged in. And our front panel Type-C header is just here. We've got a right-angled USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type-A header here, so we can go ahead and bring our cable through the cutout. We'll line it up with the header and push into place. I've gone ahead and plugged the cables into our power supply that we're going to need, so I've plugged in our 24-pin motherboard cable. I plugged in a single EPS cable. It's got two 8-pin EPS connectors coming from it. We've got a 12-volt 2x6 cable to power our graphics card, and I plugged in a SATA power cable. Both our AIO and also our Fractal hub is going to need SATA power. And then we can secure our power supply bracket to the back of our power supply using the large power supply screws. And then we'll slide our power supply into place with the power supply fan facing down the way. And we can then secure our power supply into place by tightening up the two thumb screws. We've got an 8 and a 4-pin EPS connector at the top left of the motherboard, so we can bring our EPS cables through and get them plugged into the motherboard. And then we can just pull all the excess cable through to the back. Our 24-pin cable is going to go into this header here, so we'll go ahead and bring it through the cutout and get it plugged into the motherboard. So that's all the cables we're going to need to plug into the right-hand side of the motherboard, so we can go ahead and replace our cable cover bracket. And we'll secure it into place at the back using the two thumb screws. And then we're going to need to plug a SATA cable into the bottom of our hub. One of the nice things about this AIO is that the fans come pre-installed on the radiator, so we can go ahead and set our top fan stroke radiator bracket on top of the radiator. Then we can secure the radiator to the bracket using the short radiator screws. Just before we set our AIO into place, I'm going to pass our fan cables through to the back, and then we can set the AIO up into place at the top and lower it down into place. We can then secure the bracket at the top by tightening the two thumb screws. And at this stage we can replace our top panel. So coming from our AIO, we've got a 4-pin PWM connector, and we're going to plug that into our pump header on the motherboard. But we've also got 2 additional ports we're going to need to plug cables into. So the first is a USB cable, so we've got a Type-C connector here. And the other end we're going to plug into a USB 2.0 header on our motherboard. We've got a large cable to go into this connector here, and coming from it we've got a SATA power connector which is going to power our pump, and we've also got 2 little adapters here. One of them is for PWM and one of them is for RGB, and we're going to plug our fans on the radiator into here. We need to remove the plastic protection from the bottom, and if you're using the AIO from new, there will be thermal paste pre-applied. I've used this one before, so I'm going to add some more thermal paste to the CPU. And then we can go ahead and line the pump up with the bracket we've installed on the motherboard. And then we can get a thumb screw onto each corner, and it's the ones with the 4 dots on it that we're going to use. Our CPU fan header is this grey one at the top of the motherboard, so we'll go ahead and get the PWM cable coming from the pump plugged into it. And then we'll just pull all the excess cable through to the back. And the other 2 cables coming from the pump, we're just going to route up to the back. We've got another USB 2.0 header at the bottom of the motherboard, so we'll bring the USB cable coming from our pump through and get it plugged in. Then at the back of the case, we just need to plug the RGB cable coming from our fans into the RGB cable coming from our pump, and we'll do the same with the PWM cable. Last thing to connect up is the SATA cable coming from our pump to the SATA cable coming from our power supply. We're now ready to install our graphics card, and we're going to need to remove the first and second expansion slot covers from the top. Next, we can insert our graphics card into the case. We'll go ahead and line the graphics card up with the slot, and once we're happy everything's lined up, it's just some firm pressure and the graphics card's going to clip into place. Next, we can bring our 12V 2x6 cable through the cutout at the bottom. We'll go ahead and line it up with our graphics card and push into place, and then we'll pull the excess cable through to the back. Okay, last thing to do is some cable management at the back and get the panels back on again. Okay, so that's the build setup and looking absolutely amazing. I think the black and white theme that I've gone with works so well in this case. If you don't know how to set the PC up, including installing Windows, the drivers, the RGB software, entering the BIOS, updating the BIOS, and adjusting all the BIOS settings, I've made another video that covers all of that, and you'll find a link to that video in the description. The only thing that video won't show you how to do is to set up Fractal's brand new Adjust Pro hub, so I'm going to spend a couple of minutes showing you how to do that now. So you're going to head over to this web link, you'll find it in the description. I'm going to have to select a username and password to get beta access. I imagine once this goes live, you'll be able to register for an account. So what we then can do is add Fractal USB device. It's found our Adjust Pro hub. We'll click on it and click on connect. Okay, so we've got options on the homepage for lighting, cooling, firmware update, or factory reset. We've also got the manual and support options here. I'm going to go ahead and click on lighting first of all. Okay, so we can see all our devices. We only want to control some of them. We can unselect the ones we want to control. We can, of course, name the devices and we can change what they are. For example, if it's a fan, we can select fan. At the moment, we're on Northern Lights and we've got a range of Fractal themes. So let's try a different one. Let's try Summer Sky. We'll try Sunset. And you can see now how this RGB lighting bar on the front of the case looks absolutely amazing. So it's just not lighting on the fans, we've got lighting around the outside as well. If we want to do our own custom lighting, we can do that. So let's go into Still. And if we want to go for static white, we can do that. Just type the code in and we'll click on Save As New. And we'll call it static white and click on OK. So that's the main lighting. We've also got startup effects, but at the moment it's set to the white Meshify effect. We can, of course, customize this as well and have a different effect for starting up, but I'm happy with this. And let's head over to cooling. So you can see we've got our 4 ports. At the moment, our fans are plugged into port number 1 and they're running around about 725, 750 revs per minute. So we've got our adjustable fan curve here, so we can set it up. So let's just pop the fans up to full speed and click on apply. And in the background, I can hear the noise kicking up. I can feel the air ahead of me and we're up to 1850 revs per minute. I'm just going to reset this to standard and click apply. And obviously we could adjust each of these ports individually. So this seems like an absolutely brilliant idea. No RGB software on your PC. Go to a web browser, adjust the settings on the hub. They're sent to the hub and stored on the hub, and then there's no software running on your PC affecting its performance. What I'm planning on doing now is some thermal testing, and then I'm going to be back with the case review. So you want to hear what I think about this case, you're going to want to check out that video, and you'll find a link to it in the description. If you have enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well. Thanks for watching.